The Pseudo Nerd Podcast.
Or a board game revolution, as I like to call it.
I've never heard you call it that, but
you've said it. You've now said it, I think 4 times, and it is the title of the rundown.
Teetering between dude and dork.
From a physics or realistic standpoint, it makes more sense than this Death Star that can just do that.
These friends discuss everything from sports.
I hope you don't win a playoff game with your kicker scoring the most points.
To movies.
The whole idea of Hermione and Harry Potter, it's just like having the jock getting with the cheerleader to me.
To cheeseburgers.
Baconzilla is just an extra thing I'll have.
It's an added bonus, a little treat.
The 2 Baconzillas I get are the extra added treat.
This is the Pseudo Nerd Podcast with Josh Kiser.
You could come in there, scissor kick some people, do a spinneroonie, get tossed out.
Josh had it.
If you've never read the graphic novel and watched that, you walk away from it thinking about Batman and Batgirl instead of Batman and Joker.
And Kyle Hougie.
He's just bathing in his blood.
Get ready. The Pseudo Nerd Podcast starts now.
Welcome everybody to episode 64 of the Pseudo Nerd Podcast for July 14th, 2017. I am Josh Kiser, and I am joined today by, yet again, just Kyle Hoagland.
I might as well just be your co-host at this point. Well, I mean, for obvious reasons that I'm the co-host anyways, but...
I know, I feel like at this point, our intro needs to be edited accordingly and just remove the whole "with Josh Addicts" out of there.
I don't know. I feel like there's got to be there has to be an unwritten rule in podcasting where if one of your hosts isn't around for a while that he gets bumped down to the AA ball team or something until he can improve on his stats, because right now he's on quite the extended disabled list. And I'm only saying all these things because it's Tuesday, so I believe the All-Star game is today as well.
That is correct. It is. I've not actually followed up on the score. I saw it was 1-0 in the 5th in favor.
That's exactly the last time I saw it. Yeah, I was picking up a stud finder from the in-laws because we got some wall art to hang up, and just wanted to make sure we weren't breaking the walls down, as one Chris Jericho would say.
You'd think that you could call on your wife to be a stud finder, right?
You know what? I think I said at least 8 or 9 different stupid dad-like jokes involving stud finder today.
I mean, every time you have a stud finder, you have to pretty much at least at one point have it beep across your wiener, in normal male fashion.
And sadly, I did not do that, mainly because it was my father-in-law who gave me the stud finder. I felt it was probably inappropriate. In fact, I think I still left it in the car. I probably have to get that after we're done recording.
Yeah.
But anywho, by the way, have you noticed that I feel like we've been really movie heavy the past couple of full podcasts. I was kind of looking at the all the episodes. Like I said, we had Guardians of the Galaxy, then we had the summer blockbuster movie preview, then a Wonder Woman review, and then we had a couple things in between E3, Game of Thrones, and then Transformers 5 we did, and now here we are talking about Spider-Man. It just seems like, man, it's summer. I get it. But I'm really looking forward to when there's not so much to talk about in the theatrical cinema universes.
Well, as you said, we are discussing in today's podcast Spiderman Homecoming. But that's just what it is. It's the summer movie time. This is when the big movies are here, and our PNPers, they need to know if they need to go out and see these movies, and where else do they turn to? Rotten Tomatoes? No. They got to come to the Pseudo Nerd Podcast. So we need to be out there watching these movies and reviewing them for them. So, we are doing a service for all of them so they can avoid maybe going to see Transformers, and in favor of maybe seeing Spider-Man Homecoming. Yeah.
And this is starting to feel like a little bit of a job. This is now the second straight movie for this podcast that I went to go see solo. Wait. I saw Transformers with you, didn't I?
You did see Transformers. Thanks for remembering.
That's how much I remembered that cinematic adventure. But it's the first time where I felt like, I need to go see this movie because we're going to talk about it. Wonder Woman was one of them where it just happened to fall on like when other people wanted to go see it. And I'm like, well, I gotta see it anyways. This movie, I legitimately went by myself. Wife was still at work. You had already seen it, obviously, and and obviously we'll talk about it. That's what this whole podcast is about. But I think that's the reason why I'm looking forward to things a little bit different, because as much as I like movies and talking about them, it's a little lonely when like oh man, it's like almost like homework to go see that movie and then kind of write down some notes and some talking points.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely it's not an easy job. It's not a glamorous job here in podcasting, but somebody's got to do it. And fear not, PMPers, Kyle and myself are here anyways to break down Spider-Man Homecoming. And maybe one day we can talk about Haddix's Homecoming to the podcast. But in the meantime, all we can do is talk about Peter Parker and his complete entry into the Marvel Universe. All right, so let's just get right into it, Kyle. As we like to do, let's open things up by discussing not just the characters, but also kind of our initial thoughts. What was your expectations coming into the Spider-Man Homecoming movie? And, your thoughts in Spider-Man, I guess, in general. Is this a movie that you're looking forward to? Are you a Spider-Man fan?
You know what? Spider-Man's kind of in the middle for me. Like I as far as comics, actually, Spider-Man was my favorite. As far as from the movie's perspective, I feel it's been such a long time removed from the Tobey Maguire era, and I know a lot of people probably weren't giving the Garfield era much of a chance.
I think people were kind of over the Sony making Spider-Man movies at that point. I think they were just. Garfield probably got a bad rap, but they weren't the greatest movies either. They were okay, but not awesome.
Sure. So I did go into this movie thinking that it's got to be pretty good, considering that Spider-Man was pretty awesome in Civil War. It's kind of like comparing like when Wonder Woman showed up in the Batman versus Superman. Obviously, we knew that both of those characters would be in those respective movies. That was not like a shocker or anything like that. But we do feel like that their presence kind of stole the show. So we were looking forward to their actual their solo movie. So for that, I was excited. I know it wasn't a full Marvel Studios movie. It was more of a collaboration between them and Sony, but ultimately it's still a Sony property. So you kind of have to walk that line a little bit. As far as after leaving, I thought it was a very good movie. I think it's actually probably one of the most pure Spider-Man movies I've ever seen. When you're actually talking about going to comparing to the comics. But as far as maybe comparing to the other MCU movies, and maybe just because it didn't have so much of an otherworldly presence to it, it didn't seem as epic as the other ones, but still good nonetheless.
It's funny you say that because I agree with you in some aspects. It's not a end of the world kind of movie, and I think that fit it well. It was obviously a way for them to reboot the Spider-Man character and then enter it into the Marvel cinematic universe. So we had seen Tom Holland and his portrayal in Civil War, and it got you hyped for this, I think. He did, you were excited. Spider-Man was pretty awesome in Civil War. So I came into it expecting it to be good. I was also, I don't know if I'd say I was like super hyped for it like I am for some of these other Marvel movies. And I think the reason being is we have seen a lot of Spider-Man movies in the last, 10, 12, 15 years. We've had 5 Spider-Man movies. This is being now the 6th. I think 12 in 15 years we've had 6 Spider-Man movies. So that's it's a lot anyways. So there was some a little dread there, like I hope they don't just redo the same thing over and over. But for me, I'm a big Spider-Man fan. Next to Superman, he is my favorite. So initial thoughts, enjoyed the movie. I do have some gripes, but we'll get into that as we get further into our podcast. But that said, let's just jump into the characters. Peter Parker, obviously played by Tom Holland. We saw him in Civil War, as we both discussed. Do you think it was more of the same here, Kyle? Did you like his portrayal? Did you think it was better in Civil War? About the same? What are you thinking?
Well, I mean, it gave us more time to really concentrate on the character. I think it was very much just kind of teased as far as what he could be. And once again, kind of like Wonder Woman. Like you wanted more. I'm very, very happy that they did not do the I got bit by a spider again, like for the third time. That was one thing that I was really hoping that mention it, maybe have even a flashback at most. But I was really hoping that this was just going to continue right after Civil War. That's the way it was. So I'm very happy with that. I think the thing was, a lot of people went into this movie already kind of, I wouldn't say bummed or upset, but I think there were a lot of people that, okay, this is the third time now we're getting a Peter Parker Spider-Man. And there definitely was an audience out there that was wondering about Miles Morales. And I know we'll talk about him later on in the podcast. If you're not going to, I definitely will be. That maybe that could have been who would have been in Civil War. But we got Peter Parker. We knew that was what was going to be coming in. I'm glad this wasn't like in a sense a reboot number 3 of the origin story. So for that, I do appreciate.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you just said. As far as Tom Holland, I think he's a great Spider-Man. I think he really nails. The one thing I'll give Andrew Garfield, he was a good Spider-Man, not much of a Peter Parker, but he really kind of, and Holland, I think, enhances even that when it comes to the banter and being a little bit silly and kind of sarcastic in the suit, when he's kind of talking smack to thugs and things like that.
Yeah, he's awkward. He doesn't know how to do it. He's totally green when it comes to, and we see that throughout.
Actually, his suit's red. Are you red-green colorblind? His suit's red.
Sorry, my bad. I am a little bit. I'm Christmas colorblind, so okay, I get those things mixed up. So my bad.
No, but yes, you're right. I mean, he's just very new, still kind of getting used to it, and they played that well. The Peter Parker end of it, I still think Tobey Maguire's the best Peter Parker out of the 3. Obviously, time for improvement on Holland. I don't think he can't be the best Peter Parker. I just think the script didn't give him much leeway there. I think it leaves a lot left to be seen from the Peter Parker end of the character. I just think there's more that could be done that they didn't really touch on. So
would you say that writing wise, if they would have had Homecoming's writing with Tobey Maguire as the younger Spider-Man, you think that would have been a good mixture?
No, not necessarily. It's not so much the actor. I guess it's just I thought Maguire had the writing for Peter Parker and the original Spider-Man was the best we've seen yet for the character of Peter Parker. I think Holland can play him well. He's a little bit younger. He's 21, but he looks like he's about 12. And I think he can be a better Peter Parker. I just think the writing didn't give him the chance to be that at this point.
Well, once again, would you have rather have had like the Tobey Maguire playing the 14-year-old Spider-Man, or having because I think they had Tobey Maguire being more like a senior graduating high school, starting into college, right? So that was the version of Spider-Man we got, which once again is not very accurate considering that Spider-Man does get his powers when he's in his early teenage years.
Sure. And I mean that's something that could be debated all day. It's just for me, I think Holland can be the best Peter Parker. I just don't think they gave him enough to do that in this movie. That said, let's move on to the villain of the story. Of course, Vulture was the villain, played by Michael Keaton. What do you think about Keaton's performance in this, Kyle?
He is bar none the most interesting villain so far in the MCU, and
even more so than Loki.
Yes, I do.
Wow.
And the reason why is because he was the perfect villain for Spider-Man, especially starting out, because Spider-Man has, as good as he is, as powerful as he can be, when you're just starting out as a 14-year-old Spider-Man, you have to take on a villain that is someone that he could take on. He's not going to take,
absolutely. Yeah.
He's not going to take on Avenger level bad guys yet. He's nowhere near ready to do anything like that, even though his potential is definitely high enough to be in that echelon of the Avengers. But I think Michael Keaton nailed it. I think he was the most interesting of the two. I think he played it very, very well. And I think the choice of having Vulture be the first bad guy in the Spider-Man world, I think was a very, very, very good choice on the side of Sony.
I agree with you there. I think it was nice to have, somebody different, somebody fresh. I mean, they tried that in Amazing Spider-Man, bringing in the Lizard. I can't think of his. I want to call him Dr. Lizard, but that's not the Lizard Man, he was the one-armed scientist. But
right.
I like that idea, bringing in a different villain, not redoing, Hobgoblin or Green Goblin or, even doing like a Venom or something like that. I like the idea, like you said, of bringing in somebody. And Michael Keaton playing Vulture, and the way they wrote the Vulture character in and how he was, I mean, you could kind of relate to him a little bit, like where his motives were.
It didn't seem like an evil guy. He was a guy who had to do what he had to do, and it kind of got corrupted in the process.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly how it did. And the way they tied his powers in, which we can kind of get into later, using the alien technology, thought it was really well done there. I might not go as far as saying he's better than Loki, but he's right up there easily as one of the most interesting and best villains we've seen in all of the Marvel movies. So hats off to them for really getting the villain right in this.
And I'm also glad he's not dead. And once again, spoilers, we're going to obviously talk about the movie, but I'm glad he's not dead. That opens up the chance that he may be involved later. Not saying he's going to be, but it doesn't close the door.
Absolutely.
Which also excites me a bit.
Yeah, definitely. Let's move on. His Peter Parker's right-hand man, not Harry Osborn, I'm sorry, Ned. A guy named Ned.
Classic Ned.
This is just your typical fat buddy high school guy who's a bit of a nerd.
You know all about that, right?
That's right. I lived it. I don't know. Ned was supposed to be a bit of the comic relief and also kind of he's the one who finds out about Peter's, powers, and he's going to be the guy in the chair, he likes to refer to himself, or the typical comic book Overwatch person who monitors all the computers and kind of tells them where to go, that kind of thing.
You know what he was? He was the guy in the movie that was there to explain who Spider-Man was for somebody who'd never know what Spider-Man was, because he asked so many questions throughout the movie, like, can you do this? How'd you get that? So he was like the walking, talking origin story of Spider-Man.
Without having to do the flashbacks.
Yeah, so I actually like that. I actually really like that he kind of was like, oh, can you do this? How strong are you? How far can you shoot? Can I get bitten? Like, no, the spider's dead, blah, blah, blah. So it's like he was asking a bunch of questions and Peter was like answering them kind of begrudgingly and annoyingly. But that was how we got in a 14-year-old, 15-year-old's perspective of the origin story, which it seems actually much more believable than saying, hey, let's just do the origin story for the third time.
Right. No, I it's a great point. I'm glad you brought it up like that, because it was a good way of brushing over the origin story without showing it for a third time. Outside of that, I'm not sure I was crazy about the character Ned, and I think that's more just because Harry was always Peter Parker's, partner in crime, so to speak. And he was not. He's not. This is Ned, but it is what it is.
Well, I think all the characters kind of are. All those kind of characters kind of shine that light too. And I'm sure we'll talk about the next person, where it's once again not someone that we're used to seeing. Another thing I want to mention about Ned, though, that I was kind of annoyed about was how in the world is this? I understand he's smart. I understand he might even be a borderline genius from a high school's perspective, but the fact that he was able to hack into a Tony Stark suit and unlock all the capabilities of the Spider-Man suit, I kind of was like, all right, I gotta call some shenanigans on this. Like, that guy just basically hooked up his thing, his whatever, to some Dell laptop, and all of a sudden he's in the suit and hacking into it. I'm like, I'm pretty sure unless Tony Stark purposely made it weak enough to be hacked into so that that way Peter Parker would be able to unlock the capabilities, because that's something Tony Stark would do if he knew that something had training wheels on it. He would try as much as he could to try and like hack into it, unlock all the features, and figure it out. Just kind of by the seat of your pants. But I just felt like Ned had like shield level clearance to get through that suit, which I thought was a little over the top.
Yeah, I mean, I can see what you're saying there. I do think Ned was supposed to, his like focus was supposed to be like the computer science kind of thing. It seemed like that was where his specialty of his knowledge, his genius lied, was in the computers. But yeah, I can see where you'd think somebody of Tony Stark's level would have better like security and script in his programming to prevent a high school kid with
this is like the OSHA. This is the OSHA of this movie, is that you would think that they would be smart enough to do it the right way. They obviously have the intelligence, the money, everything out to back to have all the preparations and precautions, and they didn't do it. And some 15-year-old fat Asian kid, I'm sorry, was he Polynesian? I have no idea. Was able to just hack into, say, one of the most like advanced pieces of technology in the world.
Yeah, and we'll get more into that later. Let's move on. I want to briefly talk about the love interest for Peter Parker in this. Liz. This is just a girl named Liz.
Classic Liz.
Of course, she's the pretty, attractive girl at school, but she's also kind of smart. And I don't know. I mean, for me, Peter Parker always never got the girl. And I guess there's some of that here, but I don't know. It wasn't Mary Jane Watson, and I think that's what bothered me about it. We could talk about the twist with her later and how that all tied together. But as far as her just as a standalone character, your thoughts, real brief, Kyle.
Well, the one thing that I knew about this character is that she's actually married in the world, in the Spider-Man world, to Harry Osborn. She is actually the wife. That's who that is. So when I found out that she was the love interest, I'm like, well, obviously they're not going to get together unless they're really going to just go out of left field with this storyline and just say, well, no Gwen Stacy, no Mary Jane Watson. So Liz is a legitimate character, and actually a rather noticeable one, because she is the wife of Harry. So I really didn't think too much about it, just because I knew going in who that person was. I just thought that was a very interesting, take and change on the character, to go ahead and just throw a third woman into the mix.
Yeah, I think they just wanted. I think they wanted to keep themselves distant from the other Spider-Man movies, so that's why you don't see any of the characters you most know from previous Spider-Man movies or comics or TV shows, as far as the Mary Janes and the Harry Osborn stuff like that. So throwing Liz there also avoids the Betty Brant and all in the Gwen Stacy's of the world. I mean, I think
Betty Brant's in this.
She was in it, right? Yeah.
She was the anchor, the news anchor,
right? But it kept Gwen Stacy and Mary Jane Watson away from this, and I think that's what they were trying to do.
Sure.
That said, there's plenty of other characters. For me, I just want to briefly mention Aunt May, because she's such a big character in Peter's life and in his development as a person and a hero. And for me, Marissa Tomei, of course, she's a very attractive older woman. And they make sure you know that, because they make about 1,000 jokes in this movie about him having a hot aunt. Outside of her being the hot aunt, butt of the jokes, I don't think she played I don't think they made the Aunt May character what I've always known the Aunt May character to be, and that bothered me a little bit. We'll see how that goes going forward. I thought
but don't you think that has something to do with the fact that there was no Uncle Ben? I feel like there is. I feel like the Aunt May character, the tragedy of that character does fall on the fact that it was, Peter's fault that her husband was killed and all that kind of stuff. And you kind of have that looming just sympathy and, knowing that this woman is basically alone in the world. Obviously there's Peter, but Peter's out, fighting crime, and Aunt May's kind of on her own. This is a little different. So like Aunt May's a little cooler, and, once again, she's younger, much more attractive, and she's just kind of there. It's like there's not really anything to tug at your heartstrings with her. Although I will say at the very end of the movie, when she drops an F-bomb at the end, I actually laughed. That was like the funniest part of the whole movie, was that part, because I'm seeing like she's staring at her with the suit, and I'm like, you have to react in some way. And all of a sudden she's like, what the? And then it goes to the credits. I had a good laugh at that.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny, but I felt like Aunt May in general was more, your aunt's hot jokes in the movie, as opposed to being a more serious role model and support for Peter than she really is in general to him. So I don't know.
I feel like Tony Stark played both Uncle Ben and Aunt May as far as like the guidance person in this movie.
Right. Yeah. So we'll see. Those are the main characters. Plenty of others we could talk about, but we've spent enough time breaking down the characters of Spider-Man. So in our next segment, we'll kind of break down the actual plot and our favorite moments.
Welcome back, everybody. Hack still isn't here, but, sponsors have got something to say about that. So with that said, welcome to today's List Twist List segment, brought to you by that delicious, cold, refreshing lemon lime. Gotta love them bubbles. I am actually pouring one. Brought to you by
dedication right there.
That is dedication. I actually went to the store, got some fudge sickles for the wife, and I'm like, you know what? Let's get ourselves a Sierra Mist for the podcast. So for this particular segment, I felt it was appropriate because there was actually a lot of Easter eggs in this movie. I actually have a site that cites 36 of them. Now, I'm not going to go through all 36. Because a lot of these I would not consider, in a sense, because they talk about
the
how
typical
like,
Easter eggs and stuff. Yeah.
I mean, there are some things in here like, oh, Stan Lee. Yeah, no shit, Stan Lee's in this movie. Like, that's not an Easter egg,
right? That's a standard Marvel staple at this point.
So I'll probably break this down to maybe like 5 or so that we can talk about a little bit, and they might not be the ones that you thought I'd pick. So the first thing that I would say is an Easter egg, but it is something that I wanted to confirm, and that is that it has been confirmed that in Iron Man 2, remember that shit-tastic movie? Something did come out of that, and that is the confirmation that Peter Parker was first introduced in Iron Man 2. He actually was the kid wearing the Iron Man mask, confronting one of the robots, or one of the whatever those sentries are. And the reason why that was confirmed was because actually Tom Holland was interviewed, and he said but the studio authorities told him themselves that he was indeed in the movie. So no, Civil War was not the first time that we saw Peter Parker. It was actually Iron Man 2. I understand that's not for this particular movie, but it was something that was confirmed after the making, and this was during an interview when he was promoting Homecoming. So did you know that, or did you hear about the speculation?
No, I've not heard anything about that. Actually, that's all news to me.
Yep. So yeah, he does mention. I think they do mention somewhere that he said that he has met Iron Man before that first time during Civil War, during that that first part. So I thought that was interesting. Another one though that I wanted to talk about was one thing that I think that a lot of like the Easter egg hunters try to look at are numbers, license plates, things like that, because I think that's where Stan Lee likes to put Easter eggs. And one of them in particular was Peter's locker number at the high school was 1184. 1184 is actually a date. November 1984 is the issue where Venom, the Venom symbiote, was was debuted. So they're teasing the fact that Venom is actually going to have a movie coming up soon down the line as well. So that was kind of a nod to Venom.
Interesting.
Yeah. And let's see, what's the other one here? There's a couple here about like Cindy. There's a girl Cindy in the movie that is supposed to be Cindy Moon, who is Silk. Nothing I'm really too worried about her. Betty Brant we kind of talked about already. The one thing I did want to say, the Avengers hold up scene is actually in a comic. That's actually part of I think it's Ultimate Spider-Man issue 42 in 2003. That exact thing happened where they dressed up at the robbers dressed up as members of the Avengers, and Spider-Man is one of his first ever. He's not even wearing his full costume. He's just wearing just like kind of like the shirt and the mask, and he's doing the same thing where he's kind of like leaning up against the door, trying to think of something cool to say. Basically, that whole thing was done for the movie. It came right from that issue 42 of Ultimate Spider-Man. So I thought that was kind of cool.
That one's one that I think I had heard, but it was one of those I heard once the previews, because that scene was part of that scene was shown in previews for this movie, and I do think I had read somewhere that it was like, oh, it's based off this comic.
Yep. So we were down to the last couple here, and these are I think the ones that people have been talking about the most. One of which is just the massive hint that Miles Morales does exist in this universe, and that was helped by Donald Glover's character, Aaron Davis. People who have already seen the movie may not remember him. He was the kind of like the guy who was trying to buy weapons off of Vulture's gang members. He was the one that told Spider-Man where the next deal would be at the ferry. People who don't know who Donald Glover is, he's Childish Gambino. He started in Atlanta,
and he was in Community.
So he's a pretty well known actor.
Yeah.
But one of the things that he did say out loud, and knowing that if his name was Aaron Davis, that was confirmed when Spider-Man was using his mask to profile some of the people. He does make a mention of saying, hey, I have a nephew. I don't want these weapons out on the street. I have this nephew that's growing up. And Aaron Davis is the uncle of Miles Morales. So when he says that I have a nephew in this city, that is hinting the fact that is Miles Morales. He is younger than Peter Parker. So he would still be probably, an early adolescent kid at this point. If not even younger. So, he's not in the movie yet, but that at least hints that either this is a nod, and maybe that's all it could be, or it could be maybe a sign of things to come with years down the road. That maybe Miles Morales will make his debut one day.
And isn't it worth noting, I believe that at one point, Donald Glover was rumored to play the Miles Morales character in a Spider-Man movie. They thought he would be a good actor to play it, and he's a bit nerdy, and I think he wanted the role at one point, and of course it never came to fruition, but it's kind of a little kind of a nod to him there as well.
Yeah, and also he has an alias. Prowler is actually like his villain name, but obviously he's not Prowler yet, or at least he hasn't identified himself as the Prowler. But that Prowler is also one of Spider-Man's, kind of lower tier. I would say your C-list bad guys in the Spider-Man universe.
Yep.
But one thing I did want to kind of mention, and it had to do with the weapons that were being shipped on that plane. This is not on any list. This is not anything that I've looked up, but this is something I wanted to bring up as an Easter egg because they mention the belt of Thor, which is supposed to double his strength. It's a name I can't even say, and Happy couldn't even say. It's one of those Asgardian names like Mjolnir and things like that, where it's got has a lot of consonants, so it's probably really hard to figure out exactly the right way to say it. One thing that they did mention though was that they said an improved version of Captain America's shield, and what that made me think was, did Captain America and Iron Man actually at this point, make up? Because there's two things I think happen. Either because I know that at the end of Civil War, he gives Tony Stark the broken shield. That's like he leaves it to him and he just kind of books it. So either Tony Stark is creating this new prototype for himself to just improve on the product, or he's actually going to recreate or improve on the product and give it back to Cap. So this also might, obviously, Infinity War is going to come up soon. They're both going to be fighting alongside each other. But I when I heard that there was a new and improved, that's the Easter. To me, that's an Easter egg of hinting that the shield has been repaired and has been improved.
That's a good point. I forgot about that in Civil War. So yeah, I definitely did catch that they talked about that. So I could definitely see it being a situation where Tony Stark has his new and improved shield for Cap for the next Avengers movie.
Yep. And I think the only other one I wanted to really quick just mention was everyone remembers that on-screen kiss with Tobey Maguire and God, what the hell's her name? Kirsten Dunst.
I just drew a blank now.
And, the one where he's upside down. It's probably one of the most iconic kisses.
We actually discuss it in one of our earliest episodes of the podcast. If you go back to our Valentine's Day episode in 2016, it is mentioned there.
That is true. That's how important it was to Mr. Kiser. In the Washington Monument scene where he saves everybody, including Liz Allen, there is a point where he hoists her up to the top of the elevator, and he's also hanging upside down. And you hear Karen, his AI, say, kiss her, Peter. And he's upside down. I was like, oh, wouldn't that be sweet if like Liz leaned over, just took the mask down just a little bit and gave him a kiss. But instead he plummeted down a couple, probably, hundreds of feet, almost to his doom. But I thought that was a cool callback.
Yeah, I agree.
To the original Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, I think it was just a strong enough nod to be like, hey, for those of you that are fans of the original, here you go.
And you know what? And if you are fans of the original, by that I mean Sierra Mist, be sure to insist on the twist.
All right, so Kyle, let's just get into the plot breakdown, discuss the story, our favorite moments, maybe least favorite moments, anything about the plot in general, and also we can probably do some compare and contrasting to, the previous Spider-Man movies, obviously the Tobey Maguire series as well as the Andrew Garfield series. I think right from the get-go, this movie does what it can to make sure hey, this is A, in the Marvel Universe, and B, it's going to be a lot different than any of the Spider-Man movies that you're used to. And that starts right out by showing Vulture's origin story, basically. And, we kind of briefly touched on it earlier when we talked about Michael Keaton. But he plays the role of a guy whose job it is to kind of haul all this alien debris and all the destruction from the original Chitauri invasion of Avengers 1. So you all of a sudden you're like thrust right into, okay, this is the Marvel Universe. And then, he gets his, like I said, they get laid off because of Tony Stark and the government. So
and also that's also a nod. The Department of Damage Control is the name of this group. That's actually the reason why I think they introduced this new group is because ABC I'm not saying ABC, but Marvel is pitching to ABC a comedy show called Damage Control, which is supposed to be a Marvel TV show, but it's supposed to be like a comedy. So
it's kind of like the idea of that show that NBC did for the DC. It was a comedy. They were more like insurance adjusters and stuff like that.
Yes, exactly. For all the buildings being destroyed.
Yeah.
So ABC's answering that with Damage Control. So now they're not only is Damage Control being introduced now to being, okay, this is now part of the MCU. Now they have the grounds of, because right now I think it's still in the concept stage right now, this show that's being pitched for ABC. But if it's anything like ABC will probably give anything at least one season before they cancel it.
Hey, they gave Scrubs season 9, so anything's possible, right?
They gave oh god, I can't remember the name of the show now, but Better Off Ted. I think he gave him 2 or 3 seasons. I missed that show. It needs to come back.
Didn't they also have the Geico Caveman show on there?
You know what? That was probably after I kind of didn't give a shit about watching like cable TV. Once Netflix and all that went full force, I really didn't care too much.
Well, that said, anyways, enough about that. But the Marvel Universe, like I said, is in full effect here. On top of Vulture's sort of origin story, you've got Peter sort of reminiscing about his time from Civil War, so you kind of get the tie-in there. And eventually, one thing leads to another, and Peter, who is well bored of being the guy saving, bicycle thieves and purse snatchers, he finds the Vulture's crew selling these impressive weapons, and that becomes your plot and basis for the story. So, Kyle, I think that for me, what I want to bring up here is in the previews, you sort of saw it looked like it was Tony Stark, Robert Downey Jr., Iron Man. He's in this movie, and it looked like it was going to be Iron Man and Peter Parker trying to save the day against this Vulture character. And I was very worried that it was going to become too much Iron Man in this movie, in that, like, he would sort of steal the show, because let's be honest, Robert Downey Jr. pretty much steals the show in all these Marvel movies when he's in them. So, there's some concern for me that it was going to be more Iron Man and then, hey, Spider-Man's his sidekick. But I think that the trailers almost teased us and really didn't show exactly what it's going to be in a good way, because Tony Stark wasn't in this movie as much as you were led to believe. Do you agree with me on that?
Well, once again, I think the whole point of that, I think Tony Stark even kind of gives that hint that it's like, this is what's going on is below his level of security. That's below his pay grade. Like he doesn't care that much about this guy who's selling weapons. At least he pretends that he doesn't care. Because he's been dealing with interdimensional beings, and wormholes and gods and things like that. And so a guy who found a couple of Shari
and Mickey
weapons
Rourke with electrified whips, right?
Right. But once again, that was before Avengers. So I mean, there was a point where Iron Man was dealing with maybe something of that level, but he's obviously grown up since then.
Right.
So it just because a couple guys found a couple of weapons scattered about and was selling them and whatever. I don't think that's something that the FBI couldn't take care of, in a sense. And that's what Tony Stark was kind of doing. When he did intervene, he did by calling the FBI. I think he helped put together the ship that was torn in half, or the ferry that was torn in half. But really, he definitely was hands off for, I think, two reasons. One, this is not his movie. That's from the writing perspective, not his movie. And two, it makes sense that Tony Stark's not going to waste his time. I'm sure he's busy, not to deal with a couple of weapon smugglers in New York.
Oh, yeah, no, and I'm glad from a writing perspective that they didn't use him as a crutch and relied on him to basically carry this movie. They let this be a Spider-Man movie, and I appreciate that for happening.
Because you could tell that Spider-Man struggled a lot, and when Iron Man did come in and help out, it seemed effortless. Like, Spider-Man was doing everything he could in his power to try to keep that ferry together, and then here comes Tony Stark with a couple of propulsion sticky things that he puts on each side of the ship, and just like effortlessly just takes care of the job. So you can also kind of tell like there's such a huge right now gap in just the mindset of being the superhero and the abilities of a mature, seasoned veteran, a real Avenger, versus this 15-year-old kid who's just trying to just figure it out on his own. Yeah,
and that was the big story there was Peter Parker trying to figure it out, and Tony Stark, like you've alluded to earlier, he was playing the Uncle Ben role in this. I appreciate that they didn't try to redo the "with great power comes great responsibility" Uncle Ben kind of talking in his the back of his mind. Instead, they had the Tony Stark and on it. I mean, they did a lot to try to remove themselves from previous origin stories, previous Spider-Man movies, and using Tony Stark as that fatherly figure was one of the big ways they went to achieve that. You mentioned the boat, and I think this is another thing. One of the biggest one of the biggest twists of the movie, and I say it's only a twist in the aspect of, if you watch the trailers, I was worried they gave too much away in the trailer, that it was, oh shoot, it's Vulture's the villain, Tony Stark's there helping him, and it's going to end with this climactic scene where the Staten Island ferry is split in half because of the Vulture, and Iron Man and Spider-Man are going to have to put it back together. But the twist was, it was actually Peter Parker's fault that the boat got split in half, because he was the one who overloaded the one of the Vulture's guns, and that he had no business playing with, had no idea what he was doing, and he caused that when the FBI were there on call because of Tony Stark to stop that from happening, and he kind of screwed the whole thing up. So I appreciated that that really a Vince Russo like swerve from the trailer to the actual movie.
Yeah, it really gave Spider-Man the once again, I'm not saying I'm colorblind, but definitely showed how green he was as far as being a bona fide superhero. Clearly, he doesn't have it all figured out. A lot of it, he's just kind of going by the seat of his pants, or by the seat of his suit, if you will. So no, it was good, because the last thing we really wanted. And not to mention, I think you mentioned it somewhere around here. I can't remember. And it might have been on those things you didn't like. But he doesn't. One thing that was different about this was the Spidey sense. I don't know if he develops it later, but for the most part, he had that AI, and he relied on it so heavily right now that really, I think they make a mention in the one of the quotes where he says, without the suit, I'm nothing without the suit. And then Tony Stark says, if you're nothing without the suit, then you don't deserve the suit at all. And that once again, I think that's what kind of is really interesting about it, is that really all that Spider-Man has right now is just kind of the physical, kind of the strength and the acrobaticness, but he hasn't come into all of his powers yet, it seems. Or it's either that, or they've completely removed Spider-Sense from this rendition. Yeah,
I that's something we could talk about later. I hope they did not remove it, but to your point, it has not been. At this point, it doesn't exist anyways. And you brought up the suit, and it's just now as good a time as any to discuss it. Obviously, in Civil War, he was given this suit, and it had you noticed in the movie that his eyes kind of moved, the eyelids or whatever moved, so you could tell it was sort of, there was more to it than just a standard cloth hood over his head or something like that. So you find out it is a suit made by Tony Stark. And you alluded to it earlier when you talked about Ned hacking the suit and unlocking all these additional abilities. And that includes it basically having a voice that talked to him, which he names Karen, who it might have been on your Easter egg list that you didn't mention, but the voice of the suit is a female who's actually in real life, married to the actor who plays Vision, which of course is the voice of Jarvis of the Iron Man suit. So a little bit of a connection there, kind of a fun little backstory. But for me, the suit felt like it was Peter Parker in an Iron Man suit, except the Iron Man suit's abilities were Spider-Man-esque abilities, which shooting the web and things like that, and the comedy of the suit, talking back to him. I appreciated it and I enjoyed it, but when you take a step back, it took away from the character of Spider-Man. And I understand for the role of this movie, I think the idea was they wanted him to get cocky with the suit and realize he needed to, be knocked down a few pegs. But for me, it felt too much like I was watching Iron Man Jr. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah, it looked like we were looking at Iron Man with a much tighter suit. I liked the idea that this is his, almost like the suit is training wheels, where he's given that until hopefully he comes into his own with his abilities and he doesn't need it anymore. Because honestly, Spidey sense, in all honesty, is as close to a hack or a cheat as any ability out there in the both DC or Marvel universe. It's an uncanny ability when you really think about what Spidey sense actually gives Peter Parker, or whoever has those abilities. So who's to say that as he matures, he starts to develop into it and he gets it himself, and then
he no longer at that point he actually is reacting better than the AI would actually give him. So that to me is why I look at it as maybe that's what that means by training wheels. It's there to help him now, and then hopefully when he gets a little bit older, the spider sense starts to actually show up to the point where he's thinking and reacting faster than Karen ever could actually provide.
I hope so. I hope you're right. I hope it is a development. It was a gripe for me, but I did, from just a, third-party innocent bystander, if you're watching it, it's very enjoyable watching him interact with the suit, but it felt like a little bit of an Iron Man ripoff there, and I understand it's kind of what it is, but that said, let's talk to the two big twists in the movie, or reveals, if you will. The first, you find out that Peter's love interest, Liz, the one he's been kind of after the whole time, he's getting ready to take her to homecoming, and he gets to the front door of this big mansion she lives at, and the door opens, and her dad is Michael Keaton, the Vulture. I gotta ask, Kyle, did you see this coming? I know a bunch of people in my audience, the minute they saw it, it was a kind of thing that you heard throughout, which, you don't catch that too many times in movies where there's a good percentage of the audience that reacts that way. But did you see it coming? Did you see it, or was it a surprise for you?
I think I told you before, like, there was only about 20 people that were at my Monday evening showing, and I am not going to disclose. I'm not going to drop stereotypes or anything like that. But there's a big group behind me that as soon as Michael Keaton opened the door, you just heard a bunch of "oh shit" like that audibly came out, like all 6 of them. It's just like, and I thought the same thing. I literally did. I didn't say it audibly, but that was actually very well
it was a
done.
surprise to you.
Yes, 100% surprise.
I'll say this: I hadn't thought about it. I had not processed it, and then as he's walking up to the door, all of a sudden, it like all flashed into my mind. Like, I got the Spidey sense at that moment. I go, oh shit, Michael Keaton's her father. Because I remembered her when they went to her house party earlier in the movie. I'm like, man, this girl's got some money. Her house is huge, whatever. And then I remember at one point Michael Keaton talking to one of his thugs, and his thug saying like, man, do you want your wife to find out how you make this money? And he's like, you need her knowing, that kind of thing. So all of a sudden I'm like, it all came together. Literally, I didn't even have enough time to turn to Lauren, my fiance, and say, Michael Keaton's her father, before it happened. So it wasn't a shock to me, but it was like, had it happened 2 seconds earlier, it probably would have been a shock to me.
So yeah, yours wasn't a shock more than it was like an ephany. You were just like, oh my God, that's what's going on. And
right.
Once again, this could have just been a privileged child with a privileged childhood, had some parents with money, because no one's going to have a party and have like that scene with Flash doing penis Parker. Oh, by the way, I also laughed every single time they did the horn. It made me think of a couple of our friends.
Oh yeah,
where it was like, oh, hey, it's Peter Parker. So I thought that was pretty funny. But I mean, if you're going to throw a party, you better have a decent looking house. But no, I had zero thought that was what was going to happen. I thought that car scene where they had like, hey, why don't you get out? I'm going to give Peter the talk, like they use, like, don't have sex with my daughter. Ha ha ha.
Right.
Here's a gun. Like, that was actually a really like real moment. Like, holy crap. And second of all, I just want to just also throw this out. Every single time that something happens where Peter Parker can really like come into his own as a teenager, become like that cool kid, maybe even land the girl, he always has to leave. There was like 4 parts in that movie where he could have been like, there was the decathlon, he had to get out, the party at Liz's place, he had to book it, and then he had to take her to homecoming, and he dumped her at the dance because he had to go be Spider-Man. And I'm like, oh man, that sucks, dude. Like,
that is such classic Peter Parker, though. I mean, that you've seen it in other movies, you've seen the comics. I mean, that is him. He always, he puts the job first, if you will, and always at the sacrifice of his own happiness, and sometimes at the sacrifice of, he hurts the people closest to him, but he does it for their own protection. And there's actually a term called Parker luck that came out of the comics, I think, where Peter Parker has that kind of quote-unquote such bad luck that they called it Parker luck.
I didn't know that's interesting, but yeah, it's just I completely forgot that happened a lot during that first trilogy. Like he basically was just screwed over Mary Jane so much that she just started resenting him, and he hated it because he couldn't tell her until he finally did. Obviously, in it too.
Well, and he really didn't tell her. She was just right place, right time when he didn't have his mask on for 2, and that's why that reveal. And people hate on Kirsten Dunst in those movies. I think that reveal and the way she acts that moment when the realization sets in that like everything that he'd done, the reason she was resenting him and all that was because he was Spider-Man. That moment there still gives me goosebumps to this day, and that's why it's still my favorite Spider-Man movie.
I hear you.
So the one last, speaking of Mary Jane, let's bring the last reveal. The quiet girl Michelle, who's in there nerdy stuff, she seems to be kind of floating around, doesn't say much, becomes
She's
promoted.
Kind of antisocial in a sense. She kind of doesn't give a shit. Yeah.
At the end, she gets promoted to the head of the nerd club that they're in. I can't think of what. The academic club?
Yeah, the academic team or whatever. Yep.
And she says, he calls her Michelle. She says, you can call me MJ. Obviously, making everyone think of Mary J. Watson, who she calls MJ. Who, is she going to be the MJ of this story? That's a debate for probably a little bit later in our podcast, Kyle. But the MJ reveal, did you see that coming or no?
Yes. I actually kind of thought this was coming.
I did too. This one seemed a little more obvious to me.
Yeah, it's just the way she was throughout the whole movie. I'm like, there's something more to this character. Like
exactly.
They would not create this character the way that they're portraying her. She had her triumphant moment. She really didn't care much about it. She just seemed like kind of like too cool for school type of person, kind of a loner. And yeah, the moment she's like, "I was calling me MJ," I did kind of have like a half smile, like, "Oh, you creative little bastards." It's Sony.
Yeah. I just hope she's not the MJ and she's not his love interest going forward. That's my biggest.
Yeah,
thing
we're hoping that was just more of a nod, more than a "Hey, I am MJ."
Just to get people talking. I don't know. I wasn't crazy about her character. She's not what MJ is to me or what I think she would be to Peter Parker. So I kind of hope it's just, like you said, a nod and nothing more than that. Any other final thoughts before we move out of this, or anything with the plot or your favorite moments or anything like that we did not discuss here that you want to make mention?
No, I have one other thing to talk about, but I think I'm actually going to tease that into our great debate, actually. So no, I got nothing else.
All right. Well, then our last major segment here coming up in a bit, we will talk about what we liked overall, what we disliked, give our final review and rating, as well as the future of the Spider-Man character in the Marvel Universe. All right, what was once a head-to-head competition with a moderator has fallen off to two guys just chatting about what they like the most, and it is the group great debate.
I'm excited.
I know.
I feel like this is more kind of blending into this normal podcast. Damn you, Haddix, and your beautiful, beautiful daughter.
That's right. Last week's, of course, we always follow up our great debates with a poll topic on Twitter, unless you listen to our Game of Thrones podcast, in which case we dropped the ball there, guys. We did not post that poll for about 10 days after the podcast. It's still up currently. We, of course, discuss which beloved character we think doesn't survive between now and the end of the show. And as of the probably earlier today, before recording, I marked it down, and the poll could change between now and a couple of days from now, but at the moment, we got 25% thinking Jon Snow, nobody at all thinking Daenerys Targaryen, 50% of our voters said Arya Stark, actually, and 25% on Tyrion Lannister. Gotta say that Arya Stark leading that one surprised me a little bit, Kyle, but, it's also Stark, so...
Yeah, I honestly believe that she is the most likely to live. That's why I was surprised.
So, as always, go out on Twitter at PseudoNerdPod to vote on all of our poll topics, which normally are posted the same day as the show, but every once in a while, like last time, we may drop the ball there. Apologize in advance if that happens again. That said, this week's great debate is which character do you want to see in the next Spider-Man movie, currently slated for July of 2019. There's no surprise that there's going to be more Spider-Man movies going forward in the MCU. The four I have listed here for our poll topics, and sometimes this even changes in our discussion, Kyle, with depending on what you might have to add. I got Harry Osborn, of course, the best friend / arch nemesis of Peter Parker. Mary Jane Watson, we just kind of discussed Michelle being the MJ or not the MJ, so Mary Jane, the love interest for Peter Parker. Another MCU character, obviously Tony Stark, with a role in this one, quite entertaining to see that crossover. Is there another character in the MCU, maybe a Thor or Incredible Hulk or somebody not quite so big that you want to see in a Spider-Man movie? And lastly, just anything else other, maybe your favorite villain that you haven't seen in the movies you want to see show up, or somebody else. So Kyle, I'll kind of start with you. Is there somebody on this list you want to see the most, or is it something else that you want to see?
So my first thought when I looked at this question, the first person that actually came to mind was actually Captain America. That was actually a guy that I thought, if we're going to go with another MCU character, I know that in a lot of the comics, I believe also in Civil War, I believe also in the death of Captain America, Spider-Man plays a very pivotal role. Also, in the death of Spider-Man, Captain America is very prevalent in that comic as well. So it seems like in a lot of those, Cap kind of acts, it kind of looked like Tony Stark, where he kind of plays a little bit of a mentor figure, somebody who tries to reason with the young kid. So if we're talking about from another MCU side, I think that's a good choice. But the one that I really was looking forward to, and I think it extends right back to, I think the original the first comic of Spider-Man, I believe he was the original baddie of Spider-Man, and they've already hinted it in the last Easter egg credit. That wasn't the Captain America one. The other post-credit one, that is Scorpion. And they already hinted that he is. They already hinted he's already in the movie. He was that guy that was talking to Michael Keaton in jail. I think it's Mark Gargan. I think this is his real name. And I believe that is hinting that he could be the next bad guy in the next movie. So once again, not confirmed. We don't know, but that might be an easy one for me to say, like an easy way out to say, like, oh, I think who probably might be the next bad guy is a guy I want to see in the next movie. But I do. I've always enjoyed that character, although it's short lived. It's not like he has a ton of lore in the Spider-Man world, but he was probably one of the first tests for Spider-Man when he was younger. He really gave him a run for his money, and I think that it would be a good next stepping stone for Peter Parker and the young Spider-Man.
I absolutely. Obviously, Scorpion was hinted there, shown at the end, and he made a comment that he's got some friends on the outside that want a piece of Spider-Man as well. For me, I think that can set up for a future Sinister Six movie. Maybe Sinister Six, of course, the title of six villains that kind of come together to fight fight Spider-Man, and the characters kind of change a little bit from depending on what iteration you see. And it could easily happen in this one as well. You could see Scorpion, Vulture team up, so it could be a return of Michael Keaton. So I wouldn't mind seeing something like that down the line after Spider-Man's kind of developed some skill, and then maybe there's some crossover. So he's got the Sinister Six for Spider-Man, but then to your point, maybe Captain America shows up. Maybe I can't. Ant-Man doesn't seem like a good character, but maybe somebody else.
Well, Captain America also just makes a lot of sense because he's also the kind of person that believes in helping the little guy as well.
Right.
So he's actually would be a person that definitely complements your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
And Peter Parker needs that for his confidence. So, right, giving him compliments. See what I did?
Sure.
Yeah,
because he's a
Obviously, I love the Venom and Carnage, but they're getting their own rated R movie on the side that will be separate from the MCU. So you're not going to see Venom. Sorry, guys, just not going to happen. For me, on the list of the Mary Jane or the Harry, I'd like to see Mary Jane. I think he needs that love interest, that torment that builds the character of Peter Parker. I don't want Michelle to be that character. So I would like to see it from there. Kingpin, obviously connected from the Marvel Universe in the Daredevil television show on Netflix. I love that character. Not going to fit the feeling of these movies, so I don't want to bring Kingpin in. They're not going to reboot him. So for me, I guess Mary Jane on this list, or possibly do whatever you can to set up for the Sinister Six. So maybe a Doc Ock to help build forward towards that as well. But I guess gun to my head, out of the list, I'm going to just say Mary Jane Watson because I need that love interest. I've always loved the Peter Parker Mary Jane storyline, and I want to see it be built in the MCU. So that's probably my pick.
And that's probably a good pick, just because that's always been kind of a staple for Spider-Man and Peter Parker. It's once again Parker luck. You got to have somebody that he's got to let down a lot for the sake of safety and everything else. So, I don't see Michelle being the damsel in distress type of person, or the love interest that is going to get turned down or left at the homecoming dance. Like, I don't think she'd really care in the end. So, I think you give that to a character that probably is going to have a little bit more of emotion behind them. Agreed.
So, hopefully, they do bring somebody in for that role, whether it's Mary Jane or not. That's what I'm pulling for. I don't think it's going to be Michelle. That said, why don't you fans, PMPers out there, go give us a follow on Twitter if you don't already follow us. And if you don't already follow us, what are you thinking? Get on there. We don't tweet a lot, so I guess
this is 64 episodes. Well, yeah, for now until I get back to streaming. But yes, right now it's basically letting you know when these polls come up or when we have a new recording.
Right. But follow us at Pseudo Nerd Pod on Twitter and give us your vote this week. And if it's one of those other, is it Mary Jane do you want to see? Do you want to see Harry Osborn? Do you want to see an MCU character? If so, comment below after you vote for the MCU character. And if you vote for other, let us know who you want to see. And hopefully soon, this great debate will return to its once former glory of actually head-to-head battling. But in the meantime, it's just fun to discuss as a group.
And as always, reach out on our poll.
All right, now for what everybody listens to these podcasts for. When we're discussing movies, all they want to know, what do we like about it, what we didn't like about it, and ultimately, do I go to the theater and see it? Do I watch it on TV? Should I rent it? Whatever the case may be. And that is our PNP ratings and reviews. So, Kyle, let's just get into it. What did you like about the movie? We've discussed a lot of it probably already, but what kind of things stand out to you?
The first thing that I liked the age of Spider-Man. I liked that this particular iteration was the younger Spider-Man, something much closer to the time of his true origins. I think we hit the late high school, college years of Spider-Man enough times that I just don't care enough anymore. And I definitely liked the fact that this particular Spider-Man really seems like a newbie, really seems like he just isn't comfortable with himself at all. And that is the Spider-Man I'm used to. And that's I think a lot of people, and I know we might talk about later where maybe there were too many liberties taken, but I think the one that they did a great job of and stuck with was saying, look, Spider-Man has always been a teenager, a young kid. And, all the nuances, all the quirks and the awkwardness of a 14, 15-year-old, they want to bring that out. And I think they did a great job with that.
I agree with you on that that last point you made is they really do focus on just how inexperienced he is. And I think that's where the biggest focus in this movie was, and how it differs from the previous one, as far as his age goes. Because, like you said, in the Tobey Maguire era, he's basically high school, then goes into college kind of level. In the Amazing Spider-Mans with Andrew Garfield, he is a high school student, but he doesn't feel as inexperienced, where here he feels like a high school kid. He just feels younger. And to your point, I think
he felt like a Twilight
really well.
teenager. He felt like somebody who actually was already comfortable in his own self and what he was. That's why I think a lot of people didn't really care much for the Garfield version, was that like Spider-Man's fine, but Peter Parker, it didn't make much sense. He seemed way too serious. He seemed almost like as if like Batman and Spider-Man meld together. It was a much more serious, almost borderline darker kind of version of Spider-Man. And I think it kind of turned off some people.
Yeah, I'll give you that. I agree. Kind of bouncing also on, it is tough to reboot a movie for a third time, and they did a very good job with this without, recycling the same thing over and over again. And on top of, rebooting him as a high school student and doing it kind of a different take with him being more inexperienced, but a good take, was for me the big point that Uncle Ben is basically non-existent at this point. I don't know if his name was even mentioned. You don't even know if Uncle Ben is a person, if he died, if he's.
I think he does, because he does mention something. Peter does about why don't you just tell Aunt May who you are? And he said he did make a mention of like, I can't do that, like not with everything that she's going through right now. So
That's
it seems
true.
like there might
Yeah.
have been, and it might be alluding to the death of Uncle Ben. But once again, we don't talk about how or what. So, but that's what I first thought when you said, like, I don't want to bring that kind of emotion stress on her when, maybe just recently or not that long ago, she had to deal with the loss of her husband.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think you're right there. So you assume Uncle Ben maybe did have the tragic ending, but I'm glad that they didn't rehash it in this. Ultimately, I think above all, and you probably disagree with me as much, if not more here, a well-casted and probably the best written villain in a long time, and in your opinion, maybe the best Marvel villain we've seen in all of the MCU, in Michael Keaton playing Vulture. If there's one thing that Duke can rock, it's bird-related characters.
Yeah,
right?
I was going to say the same thing. Like, give Michael Keaton some wings, dude. He's going to give you a great performance. And then what's good about him is that he wasn't some otherworldly being. He wasn't some like narcissistic, egomaniacal, galactic, planet buster type of person. He was a foreman, for basically like a salvage team. So, he came from like blue collar roots, and, he kind of like built up his little company, his smuggling from the ground up. He thought what he was doing was just taking it back from the man. They took away his job. So now he's going to make money, basically, spitting in the face of Tony Stark and the Department of Damage Control. But no, he was awesome. I had absolutely whatsoever no problems, no quorums with what he was doing. And one thing I also wanted to mention too, which kind of falls into it, because he's such a more of like a real life, down to earth. Yeah, he had alien technology, but he was a human. He was a human being from Earth. There was no super soldier serum, wasn't frozen in time. He's not a superhuman genius.
He's a guy in a suit.
Yeah, he's just a guy in a suit. And it made it, and you mentioned on here, this particular movie was a nice breath of, this was a planet Earth issue. This was not like galactic.
This is what
crisis.
the Marvel movies were before Avengers hit, the first Vengeance.
Yeah, it's almost like
and even Thor, I guess, to a lesser extent. But yeah,
the moment that the Avengers came out, it was just like the stakes just got thrown out the window. Like at that point, like they were so high that it's just, there's a guy, stealing some broken weapons from the Chitauri. Who cares? Well, guess who cares? Spider-Man, because he's trying to learn and he's trying to get his feet wet with this. So that's the type of bad guys he's got to deal with. And it just brought everything back down to, this is the world. We understand that this invasion happened. Everyone knows that it happened, but everyone's moving on with their lives. They're trying to just live in this world that I cannot even fathom how people are not like just their brains have not shattered from just everything that they've seen and experienced in this universe. So to dial it back down a little bit and to do it the right way is a very good job by not only Marvel but Sony to say like, look, I understand that there's a big all-encompassing evil on its way. We know that. Everyone knows that. But for right now, there's still real crisis going on because of the aftermath of that first Avengers movie, as well as the second one, because they did mention like there was the arm of Ultron and a couple other things too. So it wasn't just the Chitauri weapons that they were able to pull out. They also pulled out the arm of Ultron as well. So and also they pulled out the Shocker, which is also an homage to what's his name, the guy that blew up in was it the second movie? Crossbones or Skull? What the hell's his name?
Oh yeah, I know who you're talking about. I can't think of his name right now.
I think it's just
it might be Crossbones. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what he had. He had both of those fists, and one of them was disarmed by Captain America and was destroyed, and then the other one was then later found and used by the Shocker, who then was disintegrated by the Vulture and then given to the next. Hey, you're the new Shocker. So that was another weapon that was reused.
Yeah, definitely a lot of good tie-ins there too. I liked, it's Spider-Man in the MCU, but it was done pretty classy at times. I loved Captain America's little public service announcements where he'd pop in on videos at the school. Like it felt like, this is how the world would be if the Avengers were these, bigger than life characters. You watch Captain America doing everything from like health class to gym class to safety, anything that, I am Captain America. Yeah. Really
so did you also
funny,
notice too that Hannibal Buress's character, I don't know if you know who Hannibal Buress is, but he was a gym teacher.
Yeah.
And he made a mention about like, I don't know why I'm still playing these videos. He's probably.
I think he's a war criminal or something.
Yeah, they're mentioning the fact that right now he is considered like one, like America's or world's most wanted list right now.
Right,
as Captain America. He's in hiding right now.
Yeah, no, I think it tied together well. I really did appreciate this is what life would be for the average Joe when all this other stuff is going on around him with the Avengers and the invasion and things like that. So I think they did well there. That said, we should probably move into what we didn't like. For me, the biggest thing, was the liberties they took with Spider-Man. They removed Harry Osborn, they removed Mary Jane. Okay, fine. They want to keep it their own take on Spider-Man for right now. Remove all that, remove the Uncle Ben character. Okay, fine. For me, it was the Spider-Man character himself. He had the Iron Man suit. It felt too much to me like Iron Man Jr. instead of just Spider-Man in his suit discovering it. He didn't have the Spidey sense. He didn't use his brain that much, where Peter Parker always is like, okay, he uses scientific brain. Like if I'm able to burst this pipe over here, I can cause water to go this way and it'll short this out, and then I can do this. There was none of that solving his thing. It was either, he used the suit and at the end, he just, used his abilities to finally, stop him. But there was no, that Peter Parker brain just wasn't there. And I understand he's young and that's going to be part of it. But for me, they alluded to some of it, but barely touched on it. And it felt more like him using the suit and not enough of him using himself. And
I think we talked about that a little bit earlier, where we're hoping, or at least I'm hoping, I'm sure you are too, that the suit is his training wheels, and yes, he's very intelligent. I think he always has been. It's not like all of a sudden he becomes a genius. And yes, you're right. They did not allude to that very much. Yeah, he's on the academic team, but you didn't really see him, wow anybody. They do allude that he was like the smartest guy on the team.
They do say that he's the smartest guy in the team. Yeah.
So I mean, but once again, that's kind of it. Like, yeah, he didn't have he didn't really use his intelligence much. He relied so heavily on Karen and the suit that I'm hoping that hopefully the second movie comes, where if the Spidey sense comes back. And obviously, the Spidey sense also, the big advantage with Spider Sense is that if it's on a person that's as much of a genius as Peter Parker is, that only enhances that much more. The ability to react on an already advanced brain is, makes it even better. So I'm hoping that the suit is there to make up for his fault so that he can at least be helpful now, that way when the years go by and he develops into his own, that once again he would be able to be smarter, and even he would actually be more advanced than the suit itself. And that once again, without the suit I'm nothing. If you really think that, then you don't deserve the suit at all. That I'm hoping that when all is said and done, he just has his normal suit, and because he grows out of it so much because of his abilities, that the suit actually would be more of a detriment, actually be more of just noise that would get in his way.
Yeah, and I hope they do, like you say, kind of develop it, that he realizes it's not the suit, it's him, and hopefully that kind of shines more in the next movie, but we'll see. As we kind of wrap things up here, Kyle, before we get into our waiting reviews, any other things that you want to talk about as far as what you did or didn't like that we have not discussed throughout this podcast?
Could we just remove Flash? Was Flash really even? I think he was more comic relief.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those. I think
he was like an ornery teenager. Just was kind of like the class clown.
They love putting that Flash Gordon character, supposed to be the bully of Peter Parker when he's in high school, and they just kind of brought him in there again. Kind of thought he was annoying in this one. Not the typical Flash that I'm used to. Yeah, he was a bully in this, but I don't know, just not the. I feel like he's more supposed to be like the big old jock kind of guy, and this guy really wasn't that. I'd be completely fine if Flash Gordon did not exist in this movie.
Yeah, I just felt like, there was a couple of times where it was kind of silly, but at the same time, like, that guy was, for somebody that I think is a kind of a staple in Peter Parker movies, I felt that this, or in Spider-Man movies more, I just felt that he didn't need to exist. Yeah, it kind of fell flat in this one. So if there's one character I think they didn't develop well in any way, shape, or form where it was redeeming or something to go home and write about, it definitely wasn't Flash Gordon.
I agree completely. That said, let's move into our ratings and review here. Rotten Tomatoes 93%, very fresh there when it comes to that. Only 73% Metacritic, and 4 out of 5 on Common Sense Media. That said, Kyle, what's your rating of it? And then is this a theater, a rental, or television for you?
So, I mean, I left this movie thinking that it was very good. Especially, it does kind of have to go up against all the other very, very good Marvel movies. I definitely put in the middle upper of the movies. I don't think it's up there with obviously like Guardians of the Galaxy, the first Iron Man. I don't think either of the Captain Americas. I think it just sits maybe just slightly above the first Thor movie. Which once again, I think the first Thor movie was a good movie. But as far as like a rating, I'd probably give it something along. I actually kind of give it more closer to the Metacritic, maybe a little bit higher, maybe like a 77, 78%.
Okay, yeah, and then is that a theater watch for you then?
So this is actually the first movie that I am going to say rent it. And the reason why I say this is because if you're a huge fan of the Spider-Man lore and big into Marvel, yes, you see it in the theaters. That's a no-brainer. If you are a movie goer and you really couldn't care less about, Spider-Man or Marvel, then renting it makes more sense. And the reason why is this is actually one of the few Marvel movies where there are not a lot of spoilers. You're not worrying about someone talking about Spider-Man and about the movie, like at your job or anything like that, the water cooler, because I don't think there's a whole lot in that movie that spoils much of anything. And that's the one thing I came out of that being actually kind of impressed with, that this movie kind of held its own by itself. It doesn't really go too much further into what's going to be coming with the Infinity Wars or with what's going on with Captain America or anything like, they might have hinted a couple of things, but all of it's speculative at this point. So that's why I'm saying renting it probably for the standard movie goer, mainly because this is actually one of the few movies that you can get away with not seeing in the theater and not having it be ruined by the time you could rent it.
I agree with you on all that. I think you're right. I think anything that's to be spoiled would be just within that movie, as far as like knowing Michael Keaton is Liz's father or something like that. And that's only going to get spoiled if you're talking to somebody about the movie directly. But for a MCU kind of movie, yeah, it really doesn't have much to do with anything else. A little thing here or there, but that's about it. That said, I think I'm close to you on the rating as well. I'll probably give it like a 7.5 out of 10. So you're looking at like a 75% if I did like a Metacritic score. Pretty good movie. Very enjoyable. My biggest gripes for me is just from a Spider-Man purist. Like I said, next to Superman, Spider-Man is my favorite comic book character. So a lot of things on there from a Spider-Man lore and franchise aspect that just kind of rubs me the wrong way, and I'm just hoping to see if they resolve it or change it as the Spider-Man franchise moves forward with Tom Holland as a lead. Spider-Man 2 is still my favorite movie as far as Spider-Man goes, so hopefully one day that will get surpassed, but did not happen yet in Spider-Man Homecoming. And for me, I agree with your assessment. Go see it in the theater if you like the Marvel movies, the Spider-Man franchise, anything like that. You'll enjoy seeing it in the big screen. Otherwise, rent it when it comes out on Redbox or something like that. And that's going to be pretty much our show, Kyle. Before we close out of here and wrap things up, is there any final thoughts, anything you want to mention that we have not discussed that you just want to get out there when it comes to Spider-Man Homecoming so we could put a nice bow on this podcast?
I think the only thing that I really want, I want more Vulture. I think at the very least, I'm curious to see if whether or not he continues his evil ways, if he finds a way out of jail, maybe with Scorpion busting out at some point, or if he, since he now is dealing with a guy that not only saved his daughter's life, but also has saved his life, if whether or not he kind of maybe turns a new leaf and becomes more of a, I guess, and maybe not a mentor, but at least maybe somebody that just would rather see Spider-Man stay alive and be the good that he knows he is. And then also finally with Aaron Davis being in existence, Donald Glover's character, I would love before this is all said and done that we see a young Miles Morales.
Yeah, I'm okay with everything you just said. All I'm going to add on to it before we close out of here is Gwyneth Paltrow returned as Pepper Potts. It looks like her and Tony Stark worked things out. So I know there was a little bit of a rough patch you saw there in, I believe it was Civil War. So glad to see everything A-OK thanks to a scene shown in Spider-Man Homecoming.
Yeah, it looked like they were getting engaged.
Well, yeah, something like that. Anyways, they joked about it.
Yeah.
That's going to be our show this week, though. Feel free to reach out to us on, Twitter, Facebook, everything else. Go to pseudonerdpod.com for all of our social media accounts. Kyle, you're not doing the streams just yet, right? You got a little bit of time before that rolls in?
I have an electrician coming tomorrow, actually, to see if we can get all the wiring up in the other room. If that is the case, then I hopefully will be back up and running by the beginning of next week.
Well, there you go. Look to Pseudo Nerd Pod on Twitter for Kyle's stream. And feel free to go follow us on iTunes. Give us that 5-star rating and review. And don't forget, next week we're going to do our pseudo short, and it's actually going to be Spider-Man relating. Spider-Man 2, the sequel to the Spider-Man comic book miniseries with Miles Morales and Peter Parker working together, coming back. So we're going to review that new issue number 1. From the shores of Lake Erie, I am Josh Kiser, and he's just Kyle Hoagland, and we will see you guys next time.
Have a good Friday, and see ya.